So first off, before we started anything, we decided to do experiments. This allowed us to explore lots of different methods and programs and styles to try and work out what we could do with the time that we had, and give us suggestions and ideas for things we could do for final production. And also gave us the chance to test out any ideas that we had to see if it would work before actually doing the actual video. The main focus obviously was to try and create a link between the sound and the visual, to try and make sure that we didn't make it too literal and we actually made an expression of the sound rather than lyrics or anything like that. One of the experiments we did was typography, which I found really very literal, because obviously we were trying to do the images to the words and it just didn't work at all, so that idea was straight out. But I really like doing movements to the sound, because I think like things such as like an orb just expanding and contracting it's very simple, but it affects the sound really well. I also looked at some similar existing videos, and hopefully this is going to play. This was basically a 3D-ish video of space, and I really like how it's all expanded. Actually, it's fairly similar to my video. It had lots of movements, lots of things going around, lots of spinning orbs, all in space, which sort of affected the sound of it being things like that, and it was really, really effective. I also looked at a couple of short films and feature films that were based in space and had lots of very almost post-apocalyptic styles to see how they present it and how it looks. Basically anything that had a space or sky theme I looked at to see how other people do it, and I found a lot of people actually do just use white on black or pale colours on black, because it is very simple. It goes with the whole fantasy idea. So with this, it gave us a chance to try lots of different types of technology. In particular for me, it was trying that Cinema 4D, which I'd never done before. I did really struggle with it, so I'd like to have used that for my final video, but I didn't have the skills to do it, because I think if I did, I could have made something very similar to the Bells video. But mine, I ended up being quite flat, purely because I didn't know how to do that. But I did learn how to nest sequences in Premiere, which I've never done before, which is very useful to make repetitions and layering different animations on top of each other to make everything look better than just sort of one thing moving at a time. I used lots of different Adobe softwares to edit the images, create them, and do the animations, etc. My final video is, it took me a while to try and decide what to do, because when I heard the music, I obviously straight away thought of fireworks and things like that. So what I actually did was I sat down with the composer and asked him what he thought of when he did it. So because it's working for a client, I went with what he wanted. And the main part of the video is that he's very much a lover of the sea and the beach and the sky and things like that. So I wanted to reflect that in the video, hence the opening with the beach and things like that. And he also said he really liked the idea of it being a sort of fantasy thing, so we went with the white on the footage on the plain backgrounds as well, just to make it very much the sort of thing that he wanted to do. Meeting the brief, it was something I've not actually done before, working with a client and understanding what they wanted to do. So I had to work to some restrictions, certain things they did want, certain things they didn't want when creating this. I also wanted to try and go beyond conventional production techniques, so layering the animation over live video, as well as over backgrounds that I'd created myself, just to try and balance it out and make it a bit different from what people have done before. I think that came across quite well, so hopefully it did. The conclusion I've come to this is that it did have a clear narrative, and I think the sounds moved quite well with the animation moved quite well with the sound. Though I do think some bits were a bit literal and it is a bit repetitive, which did frustrate me after a while. But that may have been because it was quite a long song, around that 5 years. I think also I could have tried to use more experiment to try and make the animation blend into the background better so it didn't seem so separate. Maybe try and, I don't know, blur it or put some sort of effect on it so it really looked like it was in the sky. I also, when I went to film the live footage, I had a lot of trouble getting the footage I wanted with the lighting and obviously everything for the dark. So I actually ended up relying on a lot of stock footage, which I hated doing, but had to be done. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to start, when I have spare time, then when I have my camera, and start collecting footage together for anything I've got in the future. So I think, oh yes, I've got that already. So hopefully I won't have that problem in the future.
Any questions?
I wrote it down, so I was going to forget. Do you think you could have been a bit more experimental with kind of like video and visuals rather than relying on stock footage?
I did try. Yeah, because like I said, I tried to record some footage. There was a bit in there that was my own footage, but it wasn't very good quality. It came out a bit grainy.
Not so much like the opening stuff, I think that worked quite well, but like perhaps with the space.
Yeah.
With the space stars, I mean, you could probably just do that in After Effects.
Yeah, I know. I did have a go at doing some bits, but I'm not very skilled in that, so it worked out easy just to do quite simple things and have the focus on the animation rather than the backgrounds. But yes, I wish I could have done a bit more with that, definitely.
Yeah. You say you were restricted slightly working with the client,
Yep.
what they wanted, what they didn't want. So what would you have liked to have seen in the final piece if you hadn't had those restrictions?
Good question. I don't know. Well, straight from the beginning, I had the client and I knew what sort of thing he wanted, so I never really had a chance to actually think about it. But I think I would probably have to go through and maybe step away from the sky and things and actually go and look at a lot of different videos and see what inspiration I got. But I suppose we do anything really. I quite like what came out of it. So.
Just very quickly, how long was the piece of music in its entirety?
I think it was about 3 or 4 minutes. It's quite a long piece.
Would it have been best maybe to agree with the client that you represented a section of the piece?
I did think about doing that so that I wasn't so repetitive, but he wanted a video for the whole song.
Right. And because my only concern is that as soon as you get involved with the parameters of working with a client, and you should be working with clients all the time, really, technically, and I think that's commendable. But at the same time, I don't know how avant-garde or abstract you could be if a client is giving you very narrow parameters. I guess the challenge would be to see if you could push the envelope.
Yeah.
And see how far that you could push the client and sort of explore that avenue.
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing I got from it, and I've written it down here in my notes, it's a comment on environment and existence, but it's not as experimental as it could be, and there is definite theological references to lifespan. Is that what the client said? In the sense of, this is the beginning of life, this is what I'm experiencing,
Yeah.
and there's light at the end of the tunnel when I finish.
The way he looked at it, he didn't necessarily see it as having a narrative, whereas
Right.
I did. So that's what that bit was sort of my own input. He just
Right.
because
So
it turns out he doesn't really know what goes into music videos. He just says, I quite like this, I would like this and this and this.
does any client?
Probably not, no.
So how
bit's
do you
probably-
cope with that?
I suppose making mock-ups, showing them, saying, is this the sort of thing you want, and then them suggesting back to me, and then I'm going back and doing it again.
Okay, I think you could have explored it, being in that industrial environment, if you like. You could have explored the avant-garde in a narratological sense, in exploring how you could maybe look at that narrative and see how abstract you could be with the narrative alone. The music track is fairly abstract
Yeah.
and ambient.
And as it didn't have lyrics, it
Yeah.
gave me a lot to work with. I wasn't sort of.
But you could have actually thought, right, this is how I want my audience to feel
Yeah.
at the beginning of my story, my journey. This is how I want them to feel now, and this is how I want them to feel at the end.
Yeah.
Now I think you probably partially was successful at the end, because I honestly thought that was it was a theological journey. It was from birth to birth, the bit in the middle, and then death. That's what I got from it. I don't know whether your client is looking at that in the same eyes, but that's certainly what I got from it. I don't know if anyone else got that from that narrative, but I think you could have explored that narrative further by maybe using some footage of filming out of a car and looking at suburban space.
Yeah.
You know, maybe fixating on a street lamp, maybe some night filming, perhaps. That would certainly make the transition between what's happening on the beach to what's happening in deep space a little bit more fulfilling. In there is a definite structure. It may be abstract, but there is a story being told, and I think you could have explored that further. That would be the way, within those confines of and those parameters of what the clients asked for, to push the envelope, because you're not being allowed to push the envelope in
Yeah.
the actual final outcome as a visual experience. So you must push the envelope in other ways. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
In industry, you'd probably be in a position where you have a particular kind of style, and you that evolves over time, and then get approached by a band,
Yeah.
or an art director that's working for a band that knows, kind of what you do, so they'll have a good idea and they go, right, yeah, we'll let you do whatever you want because we like your style. So usually you aren't in that kind of position. I'm talking about very high level kind of music video production. I think some of the things that Simon said are relevant about lifespan and stuff like that. I feel a lot of the visuals, the spirals and things like that, had a kind of for not trying to be discriminatory in any way, but tribal kind of feel to them, and that is maybe like underexploited, the kind of sense of the spiritual side of things.
Could have been nice to see some kind of suggestion of cave paintings, maybe some kind of ethnographic references, maybe, if you were going to push the boundaries in that way.
I am slightly struggling to find out what is, and I know you're bound by a client's constraints, but what was the most interesting experimental aspect of this? What were you like really deeply inspired by?
I think trying the animation on top of different things, such as not just the backgrounds that I created, but the live footage as well, and see how different they look, and not just sticking to one and going with it, sort of chopping and changing between the two and having the movement and things like that. I think it was quite nice.
So a contrast between something digital and something real.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an interesting idea. and it kind of wants, you know, and it doesn't mean you couldn't explore that within stars and space and sky and
So
things
I
like
wanted
that.
to really do it all completely over video, but I actually found that it was more interesting to change, because I think if it was all video it would have been a bit boring.
I mean, automatically my mind starts to think about, can we be digitized? You know, and if we are going for the idea of death and the ending and your light at the end of the tunnel, I'm afraid it does kind of signify, like,
Yeah.
you know, quite Christian ideas of
It's
of
very,
dying.
it's a very westernized
Yeah.
perspective
But
of life,
Yeah.
or not so much life, but from
It's the whole
from an ideological perspective, i.e., you know, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian perspective. That's pretty much what you're saying with that.
But you combine that with, you know, Egyptians were interested in stars and thought that's where the gods lived, and all those kind of things, aren't you? In a sense.
I think I'm with Dan on this point. I think a wider ethnographic plane would have been able to push those constraints
Yeah.
without pushing them. You could have explored, you know, close-ups of the Rosetta Stone. You know, such weird languages like cuneiform. What does that look like when I put my spirally stuff over the top of that?
Yeah.
What hieroglyphics is fantastic, phenomenal wealth of iconography that could have been used and would say so much just by a glimpse.
Yeah, I haven't even considered it.
Yeah, I think something to think about.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to wrap up then. Thank you very much.